There's a story that's pretty commonly told at leadership courses, at board courses, at business courses. I heard it on my company director's course last year. And it's the story of the Ford Pinto. Now, it turns out the story is actually a little bit more complex than the way it's told as the lesson. So I will tell you the short lesson version. So the story goes that in the 1970s, there was a car Ford made called a Pinto that had an identified risk of fire and essentially spontaneous combustion. Ford did end up recalling a large number of these cars, I believe after a couple of deaths and serious injuries. But what was really damning that came out afterwards and is often quoted or potentially misquoted in these various courses is the fact that they had done a cost-benefit analysis. And the implication is that they had basically decided that the cost of a death was less than the cost of actually fixing the fault, and decided willy-nilly to stick with the risk of death. Now, that has been challenged in recent years, but it's important for the topic of today's podcast, which is around leadership and how you as a leader are the person who makes decisions, not the metric. So leadership can never be replaced by AI because it requires complexity, it requires judgment, it requires emotional intelligence, it requires curiosity, it requires original thought. All of these things that AI does not have. AI, however, is incredibly good now at spitting out amazing dashboards and different metrics and so on, but it is on you to interpret it. So I was reminded of this today when a friend asked me for advice for a business that she is helping to set up some KPIs and some dashboards. My original business is in healthcare, and so my background is in physiotherapy, and in Australia it's traditionally been a bit of a struggle to have that one software program that gives you really good reporting in the way that you want it, partly because many clinics are run differently and might set different things to target or track, and partly just because of the different softwares and disciplines and so on that are out there. And AI has made it super easy now to set up dashboards where you can point programs at certain practice management softwares, and you can just essentially create a dashboard that analyzes all of your figures much quicker than what we used to have to do. So for a long time I had virtual assistants and so on actually manually pulling things into Excel spreadsheets and calculating data. But the thing is, any data that we pull, we need to measure it in the context of the individual, of the business values, of our personal needs. So, for example, room utilization. We can look at every single room and think, well, that room should be making us X amount of dollars. But also, do we have a service in there that's generating more referrals for something else? Or do we have a really valued team member? Or do we actually have the room space right now, so it's not a problem? You know, we can look at things like retention or cancellation, but is that a service that naturally just gets more cancellations? Is this somebody who's new and still learning? Is there a particular economic or an environmental factor happening right now? So for example, in far north Queensland, we get flooding, where people sometimes are flooded in to their neighbourhood, probably just for a couple of days, but of course that is going to increase our cancellation rate. If we look at the metric alone, without the human context behind it, we're missing the whole story. And what the example of Ford is used to illustrate very effectively is that if we focus too much just on one metric, which we never should, without all of the qualitative and quantitative data together, along with, you know, what the business vision is and the values of the business, we risk driving people to do things towards that one metric at all costs. So to be fulfilled, to live that life and that legacy that you want to as a leader or a business owner, it's not just about money or like endlessly focusing on profit or endlessly focusing on being bigger and more than something else. I read another friend recently put up the post of the ego is the enemy, and sometimes we can get very ego driven to grow bigger, or win these awards or whatever the case might be. But it's about consistently coming back to the true things that actually matter. So if a combination of your metrics and what you're observing show that your clients are getting a less superior service than you want, or they're not getting, in our case, like a full treatment journey, for example, in healthcare, or, you know, they're just not coming for long enough to get fully better, then 100% those metrics need to be managed in the context of actually looking for the human data and the why behind it. But not every little blip on the numbers needs to be managed to the end of eternity. That's my belief, but I would love to hear more from you. And I will see you tomorrow for more from Endures. Bye.